like I'm one of the few people in the world that still believe that USC is going to have a good season this year. People seem to forget that Lincoln Riley, his first year at USC, he won 11 games. You know how many games USC won before Lincoln Riley got there? Only 4. And yet the dude has one down year, and you got people calling for his job, predicting him to get fired. Let me tell you guys something. Lincoln Riley has been to the college football playoffs several times throughout his coaching career. He won the Big 12 conference several times. He's got numerous quarterbacks drafted high in the NFL. You talk about QBU, Lincoln Riley is QBU. Any quarterback that he gets automatically turns into a first-round pick. So therefore, offensively, you shouldn't be doubting USC just because they're transitioning into the Big Ten. The Big Ten doesn't know what a good offense looks like outside of Ohio State. Penn State's offense wasn't that good last year. Iowa made it to the Big Ten title game with their defense scoring more points than their damn offense. The biggest question for USC this year is their defense. But they hired D'Anton Lynn to take over as their defensive coordinator. And I get that USC doesn't have the talent that they need to have defensively entering the Big Ten to win this conference. But in his lone season at UCLA, they went from being one of the worst defenses in college football to being a top 10 defense in only the span of 1 year under D'Anton Lynn. And it's not like UCLA had a bunch of studs on defense and they were recruiting at a high level. He has way more talent to work with year one at USC than what he had at UCLA. And I don't think it's far-fetched to expect for the Trojans defense to improve to being a top 50 unit this year, year one under D'Anton Lynn. I get that for certain defensive coordinators like Jim Knowles when he first got to Ohio State, the defense wasn't good right out the gate. But for D'Anton Lynn, though, there are problems that USC had defensively that he's just going to fix that has nothing to do with talent and had everything to do with coaching. USC was really small. Alex Grinch, his mentality defensively was that we want to be light and fast because we want to treat every play like the blitz. D'Anton Lynn wants his defenses to be big and tough up front, which is why USC has been prioritizing for all their players to make significant gains in the weight room. And if they don't reach the expected weight gain, they get punished for it. So you're going to see a bigger, more physical team up front from this USC defense. You're going to see a defense that's not going to have as many covers bust and missed tackles as what they had under Alex Grinch because they're going to be better coached. They're going to have better communication. And offensively on the offensive line, they're going to get that figured out. Lincoln Riley has had just as many offensive linemen drafted into the league, such as Creed Humphrey, Cody Ford, as he's had quarterbacks. There are major misconceptions I believe many of you guys have who are doubting USC. You're overlooking the changes that Lincoln Riley has made to this program. After they lost to Washington, him and a lot of those players acknowledged that they got to make changes, and they've made them. Now, Rome wasn't built overnight. And yes, not all of these changes are going to result in USC making a huge jump and improvement this year, but I'm not picking USC to be a national championship contender. Hell, I'm not picking them to win the Big Ten. But what I am saying is that they're more likely to win 9 games this year than they are to barely finish above 500. There's no chance in hell USC only wins 6-7 games this year. The best teams that they played this year, like Penn State, are easily beatable in my opinion. James Franklin is one of the biggest frauds in this sport because he struggles to win big games. Lincoln Riley has won tons of big games in the past. And he also has a winning record against Big Ten teams, if I'm not mistaken. USC has enough talent in place where they can be a 9, potentially 10-win team this year. Their schedule Yeah, they got to play Notre Dame. You got to play Penn State. You start week 1 all playing against LSU. But there's not a single game that USC is going to play this year during the regular season that you look at and you can say they don't have a shot in hell of being able to beat that team. Because offensively, they can put points up in bunches. And yes, they are going to have to adjust to the Big Ten. But the Big Ten is also going to have to adjust to USC. The Big Ten doesn't see receivers like Zachariah Branch every day. I don't think they're going to be able to defend the kind of speed that Zachariah Branch has. He's like the equivalent to Tavon Austin and DeAnthony Thomas put together just playing wide receiver. And a lot of their wide receivers that they're going to be starting this year were 4 or 5-star guys coming out of high school and top 100 recruits in the respective classes. You guys are severely overlooking Lincoln Riley's resume. Just because the dude had the worst season of his career doesn't mean that he's a bad head coach and that the sky is falling for USC. The narrative that has been thrown around when it comes to USC is that they're a West Coast team. They're not going to be able to match the physicality of the Big Ten because they're soft Cali boys. How are they going to be when they got to go on the road and play against a tough team like Michigan? You know, that's hard-nosed up front from the middle portion of the country. Let me tell you something. Y'all don't know about those Samoans that USC has, okay? Like, y'all got to stop with these stereotypes. Because at one point, people used to be scared to play USC when Pete Carroll was their head coach. You know, Oregon, they're a West Coast team, and yet they're picked to make it to the Big Ten championship game by most people out there. So if Oregon can be as good as what people expect, why not USC? You see, I get that USC hasn't recruited as well as what they need to, but this team is good enough that they can take advantage of a Big Ten that's being incredibly overhyped. Y'all make it seem like the Big Ten has a bunch of great teams in it when it's not. This has only been a 3-team conference for the last 4 or 5 years. Penn State, Michigan, and Ohio State have been the only 3 programs that have mattered in this conference. USC is way better than what you guys think. And I believe this year, USC wins at least 9, maybe 10 games possibly this year. I get that everybody is pretty low on them due to their NIL struggles, the recruiting struggles, how bad their defense was last year, but we can't ignore the changes that Lincoln Riley has made. Not just to his coaching staff, but from a philosophical standpoint. Putting more emphasis on the weight room. Putting more emphasis on having physical practices. These are going to pay off once the season gets here. And I can't wait for USC to give the Big Ten a reality check because I'm so tired of the Big Ten fanboys out there making it seem like this conference is something that they're not. You're not the SEC. You're always going to be second fiddle to the Southeastern Conference because you never have the same amount of elite teams as compared to what the SEC has. USC is good enough. They should finish at least as a top 4 team in the Big Ten in 2024.